The Honourable the Member for Stephenville-Port.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's with great pleasure I rise to speak about the Stephenville Airport, of course, being the member for Stephenville-Port. Right now, this is essentially just a bill that we're going to guarantee the loan, and that's certainly important. But in addition to some of the history of the airport and this sort of nature, I really want to kind of just paint the pictures to the actual importance of the airport and what that means. The airport in Stephenville is not just for Stephenville. It is a provincial asset, okay? The airport in Stephenville supplements all of the air traffic across the province every single day. So when we look at the air traffic that flies into St. John's, the air traffic that flies into Gander, Deer Lake, St. Anthony, Wabush, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, one of the key things that Stephenville Airport serves as is an alternate, okay? So every time a flight leaves, they have to have two alternates. One of the alternates has to be what's called achievable. And technically speaking, that would mean that you need to reach your destination if you missed your original destination within a 30-minute requirement of not having enough fuel. So Stephenville is frequently used as an alternate. And one of the things that is hard, that people don't realize, but we see it in Stephenville because I've met with the board, I know the staff quite well, is when fog rolls in St. John's, which happens, let's be honest, quite often, okay? So the second they get a fog forecast in St. John's, the phones in the Stephenville Airport go off the hook. And we get calls from WestJet, we get calls from Air Canada, we get calls from every airline, and they just want to know what our runway report is. That's what they're looking for, because they know that they've planned us as an alternate. You know, Stephenville Airport wasn't built in Stephenville by accident. Quite opposite from the city here. It's 97.5% of the time fog-free. Now, isn't that wonderful? I think that's why we call the West Coast the best coast. The airport itself did see a decline in passenger traffic, and that was a result of Transport Canada kind of decommissioning their role in airports all across Atlantic Canada, and that took place during the 90s. So in fact, Stephenville Airport Corporation was formed just after Transport Canada kind of devolved itself of the asset, I believe in 1998. So amid some financial difficulty, the airport is still maintained. It's gone through a number of different measures to do so. There's a great board of directors there now working to promote the airport. The loan guarantee is very important for the ongoing operations. We're looking at maintenance of old assets and old buildings. Just had brand new lighting system for the runway and the tarmac. Just bringing everything up to technological standards of today. Transport Canada regulations right now with respect to security, the ever-evolving technology with runway reporting, and so on and so forth. So again, when we look at Stephenville, we have to look at it as a provincial asset, as I said, with weather alone. And in order to be a provincial asset, we need to be a 24/7 operation in Stephenville. And currently we are. But let me tell you, that certainly presents some financial challenges. Last year, Stephenville was on record as the snowiest municipality in the country, with some close to 7 to 9 feet of snow that fell last year. It was between Stephenville and Deer Lake in terms of the highest snowfalls in the country. So you can imagine clearing a 10,000-foot runway every day for the entire winter, consistently. The cost of such is quite high, and when you don't have commercial traffic flying in regularly, it's hard to support your efforts when you're looking at raising revenue. But they still manage to survive, and importantly so, we do have some commercial traffic, and I'll get to that in a moment, and I am cognizant of time as well. But what I want to point out is perhaps something that's also not often talked about, and that's medevac, okay? And so Stephenville serves the entire southwest coast when we look at medical emergencies and medevac, okay? I'll just give you an idea in terms of some of the numbers, and these are airlifted air ambulance to St. John's, okay? In 2012, we had 77 medevacs from Stephenville Airport to St. John's. In 2013, we had 81 medevacs. 2014, seen that number jump to 96 medevacs. 2015 had 132 medical evacuations from Stephenville Airport to St. John's. So the numbers, and as the member for Green Bay just mentioned, could be attributed to an aging population or what have you. But in any event, when you look at strategically being positioned on the West Coast, we support anyone that may be involved in a medical emergency in Burgeo, Port-aux-Basques, Cape St. George. We're talking an hour away. So Stephenville is strategically located for these medical evacuations in the event that anybody else on the southwest coast would have to travel an additional 136 kilometers to Deer Lake. So Stephenville is there, so that is not an option, because when you're looking at medical emergencies, let's face it, emergency speaks for itself. What's interesting is that I just spoke with the day-to-day operations manager just yesterday, and today is May 10th. In the month of May, they've had 8 medical evacuations from Stephenville. So in terms of it being important, and in terms of it, the ongoing operation of the airport, it certainly speaks volumes when you're talking about saving lives. There's no doubt about it. Stephenville Airport also serves as with the alternate designation, and it handles some of the traffic that other airports can't handle. And while Stephenville is comparable in size to Gander, and when you look at individuals making their flight plans and choosing an alternate site, and Stephenville and Gander are very similar in terms of the size and capacity, but there's often times, again, where your weather comes into play, and when the weather is bad in St. John's, it can quite frequently be bad in Gander. We just seen two new runs here this summer to last year. Porter Airlines stepped on. They're now into their 3rd year out of Stephenville. We're looking at, between Porter Airlines and Sunwing, some 200 passengers a week that will travel into Stephenville. Again, little known destination for others, but Porter Airlines certainly playing a significant role there and connecting folks to the mainland. The other assets at the Stephenville Airport, and the member from Mount Pearl North made some great suggestions, and in fact some of them are actually being done right now. The Marine Institute CERT team, that's the Safety Emergency Response Team, so that's firefighting training, and that happens at Stephenville Airport right now, so the Marine Institute is actively involved in that, and they certainly play a role. NAV Canada is there with a contract with respect to the weather. And there's other things they're looking at doing in terms of enhancing their operation, so we can certainly be achievable in terms of generating our own revenue and try and move away from a loan guarantee situation. But the commercial spaces are also used. Emira is using it right now with respect to their efforts with the Maritime Link. They're using commercial office space there. Atlantic Minerals as well is using office space there. And there's certainly a number of avenues being explored with respect to military traffic as well. In fact, and the member from Mount Pearl North also mentioned about the Department of National Defence. Interesting to note as well, there was a report commissioned in 2011 by the Department of National Defence, and it specifically referenced that it was looking at moving 2 Hercules aircraft from Greenwood, Nova Scotia to Stephenville. And the idea being to improve search and rescue response times throughout Atlantic Canada and the north. So you can imagine if you just take Stephenville on a map and you drew a circle, it's strategically located. So while the operation is now in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, the idea was just to supplement their operations by putting aircraft there. So I've actively had that conversation with our Member of Parliament, Goody Hutchings, and I'll certainly continue to further that dialogue as we look at expanding potential and opportunities for Stephenville Airport. With that said, again, my time is getting short. I could go on all day. But it is a very important, it is a provincial asset. Again, it certainly supplements all of the other airports across the province. It's there certainly for safety, and there's other operations as well, as I said, with respect to our commercial air traffic and our military air traffic, and they're going to explore those avenues. But from a safety standpoint, and from a standpoint, and when you're looking at making your flight plans and planning achievable alternates, I don't think too far off to suggest that your air traffic in St. John's and Gander and Deer Lake would decline if Stephenville wasn't there as an achievable alternate as well. And with that said, Madam Speaker, I'll thank you for the opportunity to speak to Bill 26, and I'll let the other opposition take over. Thank you.